Alright, today we're going to be tying the green-eyed damsel nymph. And this is a pattern that is great for fishing for a number of species, but particularly in places where there are ponds or small lakes or anywhere that there's sort of still water, because damselflies are the type of insect that generally breeds around grasses and things like that, not necessarily found in streams. So if you're looking for a pattern, particularly in the summertime when damselflies and dragonflies are out, this would be an excellent choice. So I'm going to proceed with the tying right now. And first thing I'm going to do is, after I've put my hook in the vise and crimp down the barb, of course, I'm going to take a length of wire, and this is, I think is 0.20 in diameter. And I'm going to start about mid-shank, and I'm going to wrap it forward, making, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 wraps of wire around the shank of the hook, and pushing that together, making a few more wraps behind here. Again, pinching it down. Now that I have that in place, I'm going to clip off this little bit of extra at the front, because I'll be putting the eyes of the fly on next. So I'm just going to clip that off with my clippers, pinch that down nice and tight. Then notice that the next thing I will be doing will be wrapping the thread behind this lead wrap to provide sort of a dam or an anchor so that the lead wraps do not slip to the rear of the hook. Once I have that in place, I'll make a few wraps over the lead and stopping in front, and again doing the same kind of thing. Immediately at the front of the lead wire, I'm going to be creating a little bit of a dam. And it would be also wise to put a half hitch in here. It's going to hold everything in place. I'll clip off this extra and take the hook out of the vise, because we're going to be inverting it in order to put the eyes on this fly. And the reason we're putting the eyes on the bottom is so that when this sinks, as it's being stripped, it's going to be in the right configuration with regard to the bottom of the lake, pond, or whatever. So now I'm going to take one pair of these green eyes, which obviously replicates the eyes of this fly, and tie it in right on the top of the hook, which, as I mentioned already, is inverted. I'm going to be making some X wraps, cross that way, cross this way, and then some circular wraps which tightens those eyes very neatly on the bottom, on the underside of the hook. A few more. Okay, now it's wise, if you have some super glue, to put just a small drop on the thread wraps that I just laid down. Oops, it's quite a bit. And that's just going to cement all of that in place. The next thing I'll do is wrap my thread back to the rear of the hook. Take the hook out of the vise and put it back in the same configuration or same location it was before. The first thing I'm going to be doing is taking some of the fibers that will constitute the tail of this fly. And these feathers are very fine. They're peacock, and I have in my hand about 3 of them. Going to be placing them at the rear, extending over the back of the hook just about the hook's length.
Right.
So I measure this in relationship to the length of the hook and then tie it in right where the thread is currently hanging, just at the beginning of the bend. Make several wraps with that. All right, so we've now tied in the tail, and I'm going to just temporarily pull the fibers, peacock fibers, back out of the way, or I should say ostrich fibers, ostrich herl. And we're going to be wrapping that forward, stopping maybe 1/8 of an inch behind the eyes that I've already tied in. Now I'm going to twist these just ever so slightly and begin to make wraps around the shank of the hook going forward. This is laying down a very thin abdomen for the fly, but I want to stop just short of the eyes so that we can put in the wing case, the legs, and the shell back for this fly. Okay, so notice I've trapped the fibers with one wrap of thread. I'll make one more, then lift it up and trim these off. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is put in a wing case. Now, we have this material that's commonly used for making wing casings on flies, but I don't need the whole thing, so I'm basically going to open it up and cut it in half. So that I actually would be able to make more than one wing case with this amount of material. So I've now clipped that in half, and I'm just going to make a slight fold in it. And clip one end off so it has sort of an arrow point to it. Hope everybody can see that. And then we'll lay this right on top, show you like such, with about that point being about halfway back the abdomen. Just hold it in place, make 1 or 2 thread wraps right at that location. It creates a nice shell back on the nymph itself. Now I pull this out of the way, and you'll see why in just a second. And I make 1 or 2 wraps in front. That'll hold that up out of the way, but it does not affect what I already laid down. All right. This is an emu feather. This is going to represent the legs of the fly. And so the first thing I want to do is just secure this in place so that when I start wrapping that, which represents the legs of the fly, will already be buried underneath the dubbing that will go on next. So I'm going to tie that in just right in front of that shellback material with several thread wraps. And then dub the thread. And you can dub this pretty heavy and quite loose. So we're building up the thorax of the fly with several turns of dubbing. Okay, that looks good. Then I'm going to make a few more thread wraps and just put the thread a little bit out of the way while I grab a hold of the feather with a pair of hackle pliers and make a few wraps of this material around. I just realized I actually have 2 feathers there, but nonetheless, it'll be okay. Okay, about 2 wraps is just about enough. I bring the thread back to the rear of the eyes, hold this emu feather up, trap it with a thread, like such. Another wrap in front, and then I can clip that off. All right, so we're just about finished. I'm going to trim a little bit of that emu out of the way so that when I pull this shell back forward, it'll sort of be buried underneath that. But first I'm going to wrap my thread in front of the eyes, bring the shellback material over between the eyes, trapping it right there in front. A few wraps of thread, tucking down, lift this back out of the way a little bit, a few more wraps, a few wraps in front, clip off this excess, a few more wraps, and a whip finish. And there we are, a completed Damselfly nymph.